The sound you hear is not a distress call from an ordinary maritime accident. This is the death cry of Putin's billion-dollar shadow fleet. On November 28, two massive tankers, the Chiros and the Virat, were gliding through one of the safest, most heavily monitored maritime corridors on Earth. A route watched by the Turkish Coast Guard. A route every Russian tanker depends on. A route no one expected to become a battlefield. But what happened next would expose a weakness Russia never thought anyone could reach. The tankers were empty, en route to Novorossiysk to pick up oil that would feed the Kremlin's war budget. The crew believed they were invisible among thousands of ships moving from Istanbul to the Black Sea. They weren't. Someone was watching them. Someone was waiting. And just after 8:30 p.m., the first blow hit the Chiros. A violent tremor ripped through the engine room. Fire suppression systems activated. The crew panicked, unsure if they were moments from sinking. But before anyone could understand what had struck them, another explosion tore across the sea. This time it was the Virat. Its radio call, "I need help," echoed across every Black Sea emergency channel. Two tankers, minutes apart, in the exact same location. Was this a coincidence? A technical failure? Or something far more deliberate? The Kremlin claimed malfunctions, but the voices of the crew, broadcasted publicly, told a different story. And as OSINT analysts pieced together what really happened that night, one terrifying truth started to emerge: Ukrainian naval drones had reached the one place Russia believed untouchable. But the real question is, how? How did these drones travel so far, through such heavily monitored waters, without being stopped? We'll get to that. Because what comes next raises even more disturbing questions. Turkish authorities quickly launched a massive rescue operation. 45 sailors, 25 from the Chiros, 20 from the Virat, were saved. But the ships themselves were left burning as drifting monuments of Russia's vulnerability. The attack had all the signatures of a covert joint strike by Ukraine's SBU security service and the Ukrainian Navy. This was no random fire. This was a message. The suspected weapons: Mura V5 or SEA-BB class unmanned surface vehicles. But calling these boats is like calling a missile a toy. These drones carry 300 kilograms warheads, 800+ kilometer operational range, satellite-controlled live feed via Starlink, high-speed evasive maneuvering, ultra-low radar visibility. They are purpose-built for one thing: hunting Russian ships. And now they had done the unthinkable, striking Russian vessels inside a NATO-monitored corridor. If these tankers had been full, the coastline of Kandera might have faced an environmental disaster on a scale Turkey hasn't seen in decades. But empty or not, the financial disaster for Moscow was immediate. Because the attack carried an unmistakable warning: it doesn't matter where you hide. Empty or loaded. Deep sea or NATO waters. We will reach you. And that's when analysts made a discovery that changed everything. The drones didn't simply hit the ships. They hit them exactly at their most vulnerable point. The stern, where the engines and propeller systems are located. Not enough to sink the vessel, but enough to paralyze it. A mission kill, a military tactic designed not to destroy the target, but to humiliate it publicly. But how did Ukraine's drones complete a journey of over 600 kilometers, past Crimea, past Russian patrol routes, past Turkish radar, without detection? There are three possible explanations. One of them is routine. One of them is dangerous. And one of them could reshape NATO politics entirely. We'll break them down in the next chapters, because the most shocking part of this story hasn't even begun yet. After the explosions, after the flames, after the rescue, one question overshadowed everything. How did Ukrainian naval drones travel more than 600 kilometers into one of the most monitored waters in NATO territory without being stopped? This wasn't just difficult. It should have been impossible. The Turkish Navy runs one of the most advanced maritime radar networks in the world. Every wave, every fishing boat, every cargo ship is tracked. So how did multiple armed USVs slip through the same corridor unnoticed? There are three theories, each more unsettling than the last. Theory 1. Traffic masking. This is the most logical. The Black Sea is a highway of massive container ships, tankers, and ferries. Ukrainian intelligence may have used this constant flow as cover, having the drones sail in the magnetic and radar shadows of giant vessels. To radar, a small USV hiding behind a 100,000-ton ship becomes almost invisible. But even this explanation has holes. Because slipping past one radar is possible, slipping past an entire network. Hundreds of sensors. NATO-grade surveillance. That's something else entirely. And that takes us to the next theory, the one analysts don't want to discuss publicly. Theory 2. Tacit approval. Did Turkey look the other way? For months, Ankara has been furious about Russia's shadow fleet, old, rusting tankers smuggling oil through the Bosphorus, risking a catastrophic spill that could poison Istanbul's coastline for years. But Turkey can't openly confront Russia. Not politically. Not economically. So what if, instead of stopping the drones, they simply chose not to notice them? No assistance. No intelligence sharing, no interference, a silent, very convenient, blind spot. If true, this doesn't break NATO rules. It doesn't violate the Montreux Convention either. It simply means, if Ukraine wants to handle this problem for us, we won't stop them. Dangerous? Yes. Impossible? No. And maybe, just maybe, that silence was intentional. But the third theory, that one changes everything. Theory 3, OSINT strikes back. Every ship uses ASH, the automatic identification system, a public tracking signal that anyone can monitor. Even from a phone. Ukraine could have mapped the tanker's exact position second by second without intelligence from Turkey, without violating any borders, without needing permission. All they had to do was follow the blinking dots. And if that's true, then the Black Sea, once Russia's lake, has become a hunting ground open to anyone bold enough to exploit it. But this mystery is only one piece of the puzzle. Because while these tankers burned, a far bigger disaster was about to unfold. Not in Turkish waters, but deep inside Russia's most important Black Sea stronghold. And that attack would be so devastating, Russia wouldn't be able to hide it. 2 weeks before the tanker attacks, the city of Novorossiysk, Putin's prized Black Sea port, woke up in flames. On November 13th, Russia launched a brutal strike on Kyiv. Less than 24 hours later, Ukraine responded with something so massive, so coordinated, and so humiliating that Moscow's silence spoke louder than words. The night sky above Novorossiysk turned orange. Multiple explosions ripped through the port. Turkish sailors in the harbor captured video of fireballs lighting up the water. Refineries, fuel depots, naval piers, everything was hit. This wasn't a symbolic strike. It was a message carved in fire, and then came the revelation that made the Kremlin panic. Ukraine had used its newest weapon, the long-range Neptune missile with a 1,000 kilometers reach. These missiles flew low, unpredictable, maneuvering around Russian defenses. And crucially, they struck the exact location Russia believed untouchable, the S-400 air defense systems. 12 launchers. Gone. These weren't cheap units. They were the pride of Russia's air defense. And they were wiped out while firing blindly into the sky, unable to even understand what was hitting them. But here's where everything gets even more explosive. That attack did more than destroy weapons. It shut down the port. The state monopoly Transneft had no choice but to announce, all operations at Novorossiysk have been suspended. If you think that's bad, wait, because this wasn't just a military loss. It was an economic earthquake. And the aftershocks. They're still spreading, getting closer to the Kremlin's war chest with every passing day. If the explosions off Kandera were a shock, the aftermath of the Novorossiysk strike was a catastrophe. For years, Putin relied on one lifeline to fund his war: Black Sea oil exports. And Novorossiysk was the heart of that system. 20% of Russia's seaborne oil flowed through this single port. But now, that heart had stopped beating. Ukraine didn't just hit storage tanks. They didn't just hit ships. They hit the CPC terminal, the same facility Kazakhstan depends on to export its own oil. For the first time, Russian incompetence wasn't only damaging Russia. It was hurting its allies. Kazakhstan was furious. China was suddenly nervous. India, a major buyer, began quietly asking questions. And the global oil market reacted instantly. Prices spiked. Trade routes froze. Insurance premiums exploded. Because there is one rule every ship captain knows: where there is risk, the price goes up. And the Black Sea had just become the riskiest shipping zone on the planet. Russia's shadow fleet, built from rusting Soviet-era tankers and shady offshore companies, had already been struggling. But after the Kandera attack, and the Novorossiysk inferno, something irreversible happened. Insurance companies classified the entire Black Sea as a war risk zone. That meant ships demanded higher pay. Insurers demanded massive premiums. Some captains refused Russian routes entirely. Suddenly the Kremlin wasn't fighting just Ukraine. It was fighting the global market. And markets don't negotiate. They punish. The burning tankers weren't just a spectacle. They were the beginning of an economic chain reaction no missile could stop. But the worst part for Moscow. The real damage hadn't even reached the Kremlin yet. Because the next wave was about to hit Russia right where it hurts the most, in their ability to keep the war alive. What happens when a country built on oil suddenly has more oil than it can even store? We'll get there. Oil is not like grain. You can't stack it in a warehouse. You can't pile it behind the port and wait for ships. Oil flows. If it stops flowing, the entire system breaks. And now, because of Ukraine's strikes and the collapsing shadow fleet, Russian tank farms were filling up. Pipelines were backing up. Refineries were approaching capacity. If storage tanks reach their limit, the only option is to shut refineries down. And when refineries shut down, diesel production collapses. Gasoline production collapses. Domestic transport slows. Military resupply becomes chaotic. Export revenues crash overnight. This is not just an economic problem. It's a system failure, and Russia was suddenly staring at the edge of one. But here's the part no one in Moscow wants to admit. Even Russia's most loyal buyers, countries willing to overlook sanctions, were starting to panic. Because why would China, India, or any refinery risk buying oil, if that oil might burn before it even leaves the Black Sea? They were already increasing imports from Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Not out of preference. Out of necessity. Once Russia loses market share in the oil world, it's almost impossible to get it back. Putin thought he was playing chess in the Black Sea. But Ukraine had already checkmated the board. One drone. One missile. One burning tanker. Each created a chain reaction Russia could not control. And behind the scenes, Japan made its move too, synchronizing sanctions specifically targeting Russia's shadow fleet. Physical destruction from Ukraine. Legal destruction from Japan. Economic pressure from India and China. Silence from Turkey. Putin wasn't surrounded by enemies. He was surrounded by consequences. And now the biggest question remains. Can the Kremlin survive an oil war at the same time it's fighting a land war? And what role did Turkey really play on the night those drones slipped through the Black Sea? Was it coincidence, or something far more intentional? Share your thoughts in the comments.